Despite all his rage, he's still just Nicolas Cage. Despite all his rage, he's still just Nicolas Cage. And someone will say his career can never be saved. Despite all his rage, he's still just Nicolas Cage.
Welcome to Just Nicolas Cage, where I very slowly work my way through Nicolas Cage's filmography, and today I'm talking about the 2013 family comedy, The Croods. In The Croods, Nick Cage plays Grug, the patriarch of a prehistoric family of cave dwellers. Grug constantly instills into his family the danger of the outside world and tells them that they must spend most of their time inside their cave or else they'll die. But when an earthquake destroys their cave, the Croods must venture out of their comfort zone. And they encounter a guy who's a little further on the evolutionary ladder who warns them that the world will soon come to an end. Did you guys know that there's a whole meme culture based around the Croods? Would you press the button 50% chance of Grug becoming real, 50% chance of you becoming Grug? No, I don't want either to happen. I also stumbled across this subreddit that's still active called Grug Cult. And they post things like, I call it a pizza, rhymes with Grug. And I get that it's a reference to that specific scene in the Croods.
I call it a ride. Rhymes with Grug.
But I don't really get why people are doing this every day in 2025. And you know what? Godspeed to them if people are getting enjoyment out of that. But to me, it's just one of those post-ironic internet things that I don't really get. And things like that just make me feel a bit out of touch and a bit like somebody who's unable to accept the changes of modern society. Which actually fits quite well thematically with the message of the Croods. So maybe at some point I pressed the button and became Grug. And to make myself sound like even more of a curmudgeon, I'll admit that when this movie came out, I remember being really put off by the poster. I thought the character design looked really ugly, and this baby with her hand up her nose didn't look like anything I wanted to see. But I've seen this movie twice now, and I actually really like how this movie looks visually. I mean, I still think the characters look kinda ugly, but they're cave-dwelling Neanderthals. I don't expect them to look like supermodels, despite what 10 million years BC starring Raquel Welch would have us believe. And the characters' faces are nice and expressive. The animators are able to convey a lot of emotion through their facial expressions. I also really like how the environment looks in this movie. There's some gorgeous bits of scenery that the characters travel through. It kind of looks like something out of Avatar at times. And these are characters that have spent most of their lives in the desert and in their cave. And that's kind of all the audience sees for the first 25 minutes of the movie too. So when the Croods see that there's a whole world of color out there, we as the audience are seeing the wonderment through their eyes. I'd almost describe this movie as every frame a painting, but there's some frames that I wouldn't want hanging on my wall, like this shot of Grug's ass. Or maybe that would be a good addition to my wall. And there's some nice flourishes to the art direction. I like this part where we travel through the animal carcass and we see glimpses of the shadow of the family framed around Guy. And there's another great use of shadow where Emma Stone's character is briefly half covered by shadow, representing her in a struggle that she's torn between the shadow of the safe and boring life in the cave and the light of the exciting but dangerous life outside. And something else I really liked about the visual design in this movie is the animals. Because they're not the animals that we know now, they're like Pokemon-esque hybrids between different animals. I mean, you've got this dodo thing with ram horns, there's a turtle bird, a land whale, a cat owl, two mice with a conjoined tail, and a giant bug. Rhymes with Grug. Am I doing the meme right? Now, the humor in this movie entails a lot of slapstick, which I wasn't fully into. There's literally a bit where Grug slips on a banana. You don't get much more juvenile than that. And it seems like a lot of scenes just end with the punchline of Grug getting hurt, which seems a little lazy. I also find it kind of weird that the whole premise of this movie is how fatally dangerous everything in the outside world is. And in the opening narration, it's established that the Croods' neighbors were killed by simple things like mosquitoes and the common cold. But Grug is somehow able to survive being struck by lightning and then crushed by a boulder. Okay, so Grug is clearly invincible. There's nothing to worry about. But I get it, it's a kid's movie and children enjoy laughing at severe body harm. And I did respect that there wasn't any pee-pee or poo-poo jokes as far as I remember, especially because this movie is called The Croods. And there's no dance sequence set to the Black Eyed Peas, thank God. And there were some gags that I thought were pretty funny. I like the recurring joke where Grug kept wishing that his mother-in-law would die, which is already kind of funny in itself that even a caveman is like, mother-in-laws, am I right? But the one that got me was this little look to the camera that he does here.
If he actually had an idea of his own, I'd have a heart attack and die.
But another part that I thought was pretty fun, and certainly the scene with the longest lasting impact on the internet, is the part where Grug is showcasing his inventions. I was waiting the whole movie for him to roll up one of those plants and smoke them and invent something that rhymes with Grugs. But despite a lot of that creative world building, I will say that the story in this movie itself is quite simple and kind of familiar. It's essentially a road trip with a very vague end goal with a family in disagreement with each other. That's kind of played out, and their squabbling can get a little annoying. Look, even the animals are sick of their shit. And 1 hour in, it kind of dawned on me that not much had even really happened plot-wise. Cave-dwelling family leaves cave, meets a guy called Guy, and then they walk around a lot. That kind of describes the majority of the plot. But this movie actually has kind of an interesting production history to it, dating back to 2005, when DreamWorks announced that their next project would be a collaboration with Aardman called Crude Awakenings. And the story was going to be about a prehistoric leader called Crude, whose leadership is threatened by the arrival of a prehistoric genius who comes up with revolutionary new inventions. And it was going to be co-written by Monty Python co-founder John Cleese. And then Chris Sanders, whose credits include Lilo and Stitch and How to Train Your Dragon, joined the project, and he significantly rewrote the script. So I don't know how much of John Cleese's original story is still in this movie. And I don't want to get too political here, but there is a little bit of irony in the fact that John Cleese, of all people, has a story credit in a movie that's about a man struggling to roll with the changes of society. And I think what the Croods lacks in terms of a dynamic, twisty-turny storyline, it makes up for in its relevant themes and morals and character arcs. The Croods is more than just a story about cave people on a road trip. It's a movie about not being stuck in your ways. Just because you've lived your life a certain way, it's important to be adaptable and accepting of other walks of life, and not close-minded to things out there that you might be missing out on. It's also about surviving versus living. When you prioritize the day-to-day, you kind of forget to stop and smell the flowers, so to speak. And it's important to get the right balance. But I think this movie's heart is the daddy-daughter dynamic. It's a story about a father and daughter that have fundamentally opposing outlooks and philosophies on life. But what I liked is that you can see where both characters are coming from, and neither of them are fully in the wrong. Grug is overly protective to an arguably toxic degree. He instills upon his family that new things are a big problem, and he uses fear-mongering techniques like telling thinly veiled stories about how they'll die if they don't do what he says. And he's also too busy to tell his daughter that he loves her. But everything that he's doing is coming from a good place. And even though he doesn't fully consider his family's feelings, you certainly couldn't call him selfish. He always puts his family's safety before his own. There's a part early on where his family are all drinking from an egg, and he lets all of them, even the mother-in-law that he hates, get a taste of the egg before he does. And when there's none left for him, his response is just, it's okay, I ate last week. Grug's main motivation in life is to make sure that his family doesn't die, so I could never really be mad at the guy. And when his family starts to drift away from him, you can't help but feel bad for Grug. And fittingly for a caveman, his character does evolve through the course of the story in major ways. He even goes from hating the concept of pets to risking his life for animals at the end. And there's also a dichotomy to the daughter character played by Emma Stone, because you can kind of see where she's coming from. She's cooped up, she wants to see the world, she's open to new ideas, but she's also largely fueled by adolescent rebellion. There's a very revealing moment where Grug warns her that something looks dangerous, and she replies, Dad, you always say that. And then Guy warns her to be careful, and she responds, oh really? Okay, that says a lot. But the way Grug and Eep's relationship resolves is very sweet. And also Emma Stone does a fine job voice acting the part. But if we're talking voice acting, then we've got to go back to Grug to talk about my boy Nicolas Cage's performance. On this channel we've covered a handful of animated movies that star Nicolas Cage. And I think in all of those movies my issue was that either Nicolas Cage underplayed the role or that he wasn't in the movie enough. And Grug is definitely Cage's biggest role in the animated movies I've covered so far. He's essentially the main character, so he's got plenty of screen time here. And as for whether Nicolas Cage is utilized to the best of his abilities, well, take a listen. I love that they let the character have these Nick Cage-style outbursts. And it works, mainly because I kind of picture most cavemen acting like Nicolas Cage. How'd it get burned? How'd it get burned? No, seriously, how did it get burned? I don't understand the concept of fire yet. And I also love that at one point Nicolas Cage's power of the losing his shit freakout actually comes in handy for the situation and the plot. And that's in the scene where Grug has to pretend to be a female saber-toothed tiger in distress.
I'll show you scared. Hand me those acting sticks.
And it's not all just Nicolas Cage yelling gibberish, obviously. Nicolas Cage also fully nails the dramatic moments and injects a nice warmth into Grug that I think was essential to keep him likable. As for the rest of the cast, Ryan Reynolds plays the guy called Guy, who's a little bit more evolved than the Croods. And whenever someone like Ryan Reynolds is cast in an animated movie, I always kind of roll my eyes a bit, because I always think, was Ryan Reynolds really the best guy for the job, or did they just want to cast an A-lister? But I don't hate Ryan Reynolds, and I think he does a decent job here. And he's a bit more toned down than usual, which I think works. And his character is important to the story because of the wrench in the works that his existence throws for Grog and Eep. And his interactions with those characters were interesting. The rest of the characters, though, get far less screen time and development. Cloris Leachman as the granny has some kind of funny moments. The son character is just there to be the dumb butt of the joke and not much more. And Catherine Keener as Grog's wife in the movie is unfortunately yet another romantic partner of a Nicolas Cage character that really doesn't have much to do in the story. We really don't know much about her at all, and unfortunately I think she's the most forgettable character in the movie. And I'm including the baby that doesn't speak. Yeah, the little baby had a few kind of funny moments. She reminded me of Donnie from the show The Wild Thornberrys. But if we're talking silly comic relief characters in the movie, then she definitely got overshadowed by the sloth. And the cynic in me knows that the producers probably said that they need to add a cutesy animal to appeal to the younger kids. But I'll be damned if Belt the Sloth didn't instantly win me over.
Dun, dun, dun.
I had a big smile on my face every time he popped up, and I loved all the little props that they had him interact with. So overall, I like this movie. It's fun, it's colourful, it's creative, it moves by at a fast pace, Nicolas Cage is very entertaining in it, and it's surprisingly thought-provoking. Not all of the jokes work, and the plot is nothing revolutionary, in fact it's quite basic. And I also would have preferred if more of the cast were fleshed out and not just the father and daughter. So while I wouldn't quite call it top-tier DreamWorks, it's certainly the best animated movie involving Nicolas Cage I've covered on this channel so far. I recommend it to people of all ages. Because you've got the slapstick and the wacky sloth for the kids, and you've got the heart of a story about acceptance and family and the embracing of the unknown for the grown-ups. And who am I kidding, I love the sloth guy too. So yeah, The Croods is a movie that I dug. Rhymes with Grug. The next movie that Nicolas Cage was in was The Frozen Ground, so until then, thanks for watching.